Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
WESN.
Sometimes you do the right thing because it's the right thing. One of the interesting phenomena of society is that gray area where people, and maybe this is from their school days, I guess, why conform to the rules if it's going to inconvenience you and you're not hurting nobody and you're not going to get caught, so why bother, right? Like, take, for example, if you're out late at night. And this is, to some extent, a legitimate concern depending on the level of crime in society. You are at a traffic light. There is no cars. And you could see that there's no cars. Say it's around the Savannah. Because I know someone was carjacked around the Savannah around midnight. The light is red. It's not an intersection. Do you wait for the light to turn green? Do you go? You know, there are times when I'm sitting down there. I haven't necessarily been out late recently, but you're sitting down there at the red light around the Savannah. It's not like there's cars passing in front of you. And there's a part of you that feels silly. Why do I have to stop? But then you're supposed to stop. But then you hear about people actually getting victimized by criminals when they stopped at a traffic light relatively late at night. And now that's in your head, maybe I should go. But what about when it's not necessarily a safety concern? What about if it's just for convenience, right? You think they're gonna catch me? You think they're gonna bother with me? I go park right here, nobody will tell me nothing. I mean, even the police do that at times, from what I've been told. And speaking about parking, it came up, and I haven't spoken about it yet, so I'm just going to bring it up now as part of a wider discourse, because this is an example in a minor way of you should do the right thing just because. Just because you don't know who might be watching, just because you don't know what might happen. Minister Alexander, Philip Alexander, he was caught parking in a handicap zone. Now, at that point in time, unfortunately, he's not going to have the benefit of how long would he have stayed, because he claims he would have only stayed for a short time, a quick in and out. But we'll never really know because he was caught up front. So people will say, well, yeah, but it's only a quick in and out because he was caught. It could have been a quick in and out. But this goes back to you should do the right thing because you never know. You never know if a handicapped person was right behind you. I mean, unless you're looking for the sticker. And you know what to look for. I actually don't know what to look for. But it doesn't concern me. I tend to just not park in the handicap zone, even if all the parking spots are filled. Now, there's a phenomenon in that part of Maraval because there's a new food court that's open, and it's been ridiculously full, that area, with regards to parking, ever since it opened. to the point where I'm not entirely sure, is it really that much people going to this food court? And I do believe that it has spilled over because the parking for the pharmacy is technically nowhere near connected to the food court. But I can understand the practical considerations that Minister Alexander was dealing with. He claims a security guard directed him. I believe the Estate Police Association, they are concerned about that. If it is true, they are concerned that a security guard was willing to encourage such an infraction of the law. Or at least, I'm not entirely sure, given the demerit point system is out, if it's what the legal status is. I would hope that it's still an infraction of the law, even if the penalties and the like is not necessarily there. But there's also the potential that Minister Alexander or any other member of the public, doesn't have to be a minister, would have cajoled the security officer to kind of give him a pass because, hey, come on, man, they have no more parking. I'll quick in and out. What is the security guard going to do? Fight you down? In a lot of cases, their powers are limited, right? Will management back them up? It's not so clear-cut at times. And of course, there's always the, well, he didn't really get a security guard to tell him to do it. He just kind of barreled his way through, and the security guard maybe either didn't want to be bothered or didn't get a chance. Because again, we don't know how it would have played out, right? So there's a whole host of possibilities. But at the end of the day, it is one example of doing the right thing because it's the right thing. Now, myself, I have never parked in a handicap spot, ever. And that's when I was a private person. Now I have this little show, you know, a couple people recognize me here and there. I technically have more of an incentive to not park in a handicap spot. I can't come and give my opinion and have strong opinions on things and get upset about things, about people doing the wrong thing, and then I'm going to go and park at a handicap spot. And there have been times when, with regards to things like parking and trying to navigate traffic and the like, I'll take the inconvenience because, honestly, you're not supposed to do it. I don't know if a handicap is, yes, the spot by my local grocery is clear 90% of the time. I don't know if I decide to break the rules and then that will be the time when someone who is handicapped comes to the grocery and is like, hey, who parked in these handicap spots? This is ridiculous. You never know. Think about all the times where stuff like that happens. The one time you do X, this happened. The one time you put the drink on the banister, it falls. The one time you told your parents you didn't have to go out, then all of a sudden you have to go out. You told your friends the one time you promised them you could do something, your job calls you in randomly for an emergency. That's life. Now, Minister Alexander is apparently donating the amount of money he would have had to pay for the fine. I'm not entirely sure what the law says is supposed to be consequence without that properly being explained, because I believe one stakeholder group is calling for him to be charged or independent senator. For the police to deal with it, because it is a matter of public record now, I would imagine, right? Optically, it's not a big deal, but at the same time, whatever you owe to the state and should be penalized by the state, it should run its due course and go to the state. If you want to make a donation in concurrence, right, as part of your apology, that's fine. But this seems more like a, yes, it's an apology, and yes, Minister Alexander has been an advocate for this group. According to one disability group, TNT chapter of Disabled Peoples International, right? Or maybe I misspoke there. But yes, Minister Alexander has been an advocate for different issues. Let me put it that way. But the apology is separate to the legal consequence. And ironically, again, it's not a big deal, but at the same time, part of what would have, I think, helped public perception is if he also acknowledged and willingly took on whatever legal consequence was fitting. But it is what it is. Speaking about doing the right thing, there's a story in one of the daily newspapers today. Now, it doesn't give the full context, but essentially, it's a short story where a man tried to intervene between an argument between male co-workers and a female co-worker. Now, I don't know what the background is and his relationship between the parties involved, but what has been reported was, sometime later, he was accosted by a group of men and beaten. And one of the unfortunate situations in this modern times is the negative consequences people get when they try to help a situation. And I get it. Sometimes you have busybodies that put their nose where it doesn't belong. But at the same time, more and more you're hearing concerns about, hey, this child was in distress, this woman is in distress, all these men are here. Nobody did anything. Why? Because you never know, when you help someone, they'll turn around and sue you. There's literally a case in the States where a man pushed a woman out of the way of a speeding car. And based on the video, it is completely unreasonable to think she would have been safe if not for him pushing her out of the way or grabbing her out of the way. And she turned around and sued him for touching her without permission or something along the lines like that. And unfortunately, you have situations like this where it almost incentivizes you not to do the right thing. Now the question is, will you still be willing to do the right thing, or will you turn a blind eye? Sometimes you don't know what the right thing is. I told a friend of mine recently, it seems as though I don't go out that often. Usually it's a grocery or some kind of pharmacy, mini-mart situation, maybe to a restaurant or a takeaway food outlet, but I try not to buy food. I definitely don't buy food every day. But with that limited amount of travel, with that, not travel in the sense of traveling, but the amount of times I actually go out to any sort of establishment, the number of people that come up to you and beg for some help, and what are you going to do if you're not in a position to help them? And then, of course, it's always the, well, yes, but you're begging in someone's business establishment. I don't necessarily want to encourage this because I don't know if you're allowed to be here. What's the right thing to do? One of the unfortunate things about modern society. But now, doing the right thing. It's not always easy to know what to do, right? The Joshua Samaru shooting, the probe apparently is moving along. It has been reportedly reached an advanced stage. But one of the interesting things in the report on this is not about the probe, because at the end of the day, it won't have any details about the investigation and, you know, what the findings were with the investigation. But it does speak to, apparently people still want to protest this situation. Now, the police rightfully are checking to ensure whether or not any potential protest has the right permits or permissions to do so, checking with the various stations. And reportedly, no applications apparently, I believe, was made. So, one senior police officer saying no such permissions were granted. Now we have a bit of a sticky situation, because while technically it is correct, and probably this is what should be done, it should be done with a significant amount of caution and diplomacy, because essentially the police will be using the law and correctly applying the law to potentially shut down a protest against the police. And you can see, even though it is not necessarily right, the logic behind why am I going to apply to the police to get permission to protest the police. Which ironically, if we had a healthy police force and you go through the system properly, it would be a testament to the strength of our democracy and our free society if everything worked as intended. Now the question is, I don't know if the potential protest organizers, if they consciously decided to stay away from the police because they don't trust the police, I don't know. Which is why I say, it's not that the police shouldn't potentially stop any sort of protest action that needs permission that doesn't have it, but how they do so matters. A lot of our criticisms here on Talking Point with both the previous administration and this administration was not always what the decisions were or what the message was, but how it was done. And in this case, I don't necessarily know what the right thing is. Because perhaps the police, if there's leeway, could make a judgment call on the day and allow it to go through for the sake of transparency, for the sake of not touching on what might be a conflict of interest. But is the conflict of interest enough for them to ignore the law? I don't know. I don't know. It's not always easy to know what the right thing to do is. But we should try to do the right thing regardless of how hard it is. Right now, there's a whole situation with Cuba and the American embargo. It potentially might be the closest America has come to toppling the Cuban regime, whatever form it is now, right? To what extent it's still a communist regime, to what extent it's some weird quasi-hybrid or evolution of communism. But the point is, our country, we have decided, in no uncertain terms, to be allied with the US. The problem is, in the region, the community of Latin America and Caribbean states, they have calls urging for an end of the blockade. TNT apparently has stepped away from those calls. There's supposed to be aid being dispatched to Cuba by CARICOM. TNT has not necessarily indicated if it will participate or contribute to that, at least as of the time of the reporting. And then with regards to, now technically this is, from what I understand, with regards to Venezuela. Independent senators were asking, and opposition senators, I believe, were asking the Minister of Foreign Affairs questions with regards to the US operations in Venezuela and our government support for it. And he didn't necessarily want to answer. My thing is, this potentially was an opportunity to clarify TNT's foreign policy position. Because the through line between the Venezuelan situation and the Cuban one is the fact that we are supporting America, therefore, at least on the surface, or how it's perceived by the public and the wider world, we don't want to necessarily do anything that goes against America. That's fine, but then why is it that you can't verbalize your foreign policy, your reasons for making these foreign policy decisions? Why is it so hard? Because in this case, doing the right thing would be explaining yourself. Usually when a government can't explain itself, it's not for benign reasons, unless it's something technical like national security and the like. But the question is not about the United States security apparatus and what they did with regards to military applications of force, but rather it was about our government's support for the operations in Venezuela, and indirectly our government's support, generally speaking, of the United States. And again, on talking point, it's not as though we're saying that is outright a bad thing. Some of our callers, they might say that. But at the end of the day, that's, especially the latter, those who do not trust foreign powers, this is one of the reasons why you should explain to the public, because it's the right thing to do. Even when it's hard, even when it's not convenient, because you don't know what's going to happen down the line. Just as Mr. Alexander didn't know that someone was going to take his picture, didn't know that even if he intended to have a quick in and out, he would still get caught. You never know what could happen. That 5 minutes that it was going to take, it only took maybe 30 seconds for someone to say, hey, snap. You never know if there's a handicapped person behind you. You never know how foreign policy will change, how international perceptions will change, what effect it might have on other international relationships. And the American government changes with each election or every other election, and technically so does ours. But one would think if you have intentions of being in government for the long term, you will consider the fact that this is supposed to be Trump's last term. And to what extent are you allied with the United States? And to what extent are you allied with the Republican Party? And to what extent are you allied with the American president? Those three things don't have to be exactly the same thing, despite the fact that it looks that way right now. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's, could you please explain to us what's going on? Because generally, and this predates the current administration, politicians want to say less, because if they say less, then you don't have an objective to hold them accountable towards. I guess on some level they do know that they never know what could happen. So by saying less, it's harder to contradict themselves with statements in the future. But by not saying anything at all, you're not prepared to deal with any unexpected shocks that might come from this situation, that might come from this alliance. You're not preparing the population to deal with any new challenges that might arise. You can't predict what's going to happen for certain. History is replete with examples of leaders who tried and failed with assumptions of how things would be, and it didn't always end up that way. Chamberlain thought diplomacy would work. In hindsight, we know diplomacy in the 1930s, Europe never really had a chance. So even if you don't know what the benefit is of explaining yourself, even if you can't anticipate what's going to happen in the future, you do the right thing because it's the right thing. You do the right thing when you know what the right thing is, because then there will be times in a government where you don't know, where objectively it's not so clear-cut. If you have a track record of doing the right thing, then we, the people, would be willing to give you the benefit of the doubt when you yourself are not sure what the right thing is. Should I help this woman now? I don't know that I'm going to get beaten half an hour later, or however long it was. I just am looking to try to do the right thing. I'm not considering what the negative consequences will be. And if that's the government's track record, and we have yet to have a government to really establish that track record, at least not for a long time, then that's how you get the benefit of the doubt. when you prove to us that, hey, we're willing to do the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable and inconvenient, why now, in this complex situation, where it's not objectively defined what is the correct course of action, but it's a judgment call, don't doubt us now. We're doing our best, and our best is on the record as being good enough. But we don't operate like that. The world, for some strange reason, tends to not want to operate like that. And it's all fine. We're going down this path anyway. I don't like it. Let's take a break. When we come back, the good lady is here. Continue the conversation. Stay tuned. This is Document on WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Hi, I am Emiliana Beechan and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. You don't need, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
You'd be surprised, a lot of the patients who present to us with infection in their feet, the infection would have started several days before. Now, the interesting thing is, neuropathy usually goes hand in hand with peripheral arterial disease. So these patients lose the sensation to feel. Now, they may have the ability to have crude touch or general sensation, but that fine sensation, for instance, when a needle sticks them or a thumbtack sticks them, they will lose that sensation.
Correct.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar
Why? You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No.
Let's go to the last part.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
And we're back here talking about the WSN show. Michael Small, joined by the good lady herself, Karen Scherer. And this is going to be one of those topics, I think, that might touch a nerve with some of the viewers, because people have strong opinions one way or the other when it comes to their politics. You're not supposed to talk about politics and religions with your friends. But hey, this is the talking point. I hope we're friends, but we're definitely going to talk about politics one way or the other. So Karen is joining me with that. Karen, good morning. Welcome back.
Welcome to the viewers, and of course you should. Yes, we are going to talk about politics, but I hope our approach it is not going to be necessarily the party politics, but the bigger picture, which I think the recent issue with the name calling, specifically by Dr. Rowley, in which he referred to our Prime Minister as a Jamet. And the issue really, why I'm raising this, is I want to start, and that's what Shom is trying to pull up, But I wanted to start with a quotation from then President of our Republic, A.N.R. Robinson. I don't know if people should remember, in 2001, December 2001, where the electoral results was 18-18. And therefore, there was no clear majority of members of parliament that the president could appoint that person who led that party, appoint that person as the prime minister. So there's a constitutional provision that says that where there's no clear majority, then it falls on the president to make that determination. So for many Trinidadians, I can well imagine, certainly I was among them, in December, just before Christmas, everyone was glued to their television because they all wanted to know essentially who was going to form the government. And at that point in time, the government of the day was what the government that is here, today's government, and they wanted to know what was the A.N.R. Robinson going to do. And he gave this very famous speech, and I wanted to start with that because it does relate to the topic at hand, which is the issue of the Prime Minister being referred to as Jammeh and the discussion that has come out of that. So let me start with the quotation. This is what he said. We pulled it up. So things happen day by day. You accept them and they keep creeping and you are overwhelmed. You can't do anything about them. It's the accumulation. Bad habits growing in slow degrees. Streams, everybody knows this, streams into rivers and rivers into seas. And so the citizenry must do nothing. Now that quotation was what famously A.N.R. Robinson said on that night, that fateful night in December. And that quotation has been used and certainly has been interpreted by many people, including the opposition, that what he was alluding to was that the government of the day was leading towards a creeping dictatorship. That is what we were witnessing. That streamed into rivers and rivers into seas. He was speaking about making us mindful of the fact that the government, who he did not reappoint, he appointed the then opposition, who then became the government as the government of the day. And why am I starting with that? And what does that have to do with the topic of Jammeh? So, from my understanding, as the discussion in the newspapers, the discussion has really focused on the abusive language, clearly calling a prime minister, that is Dr. Rowley, referring to prime minister as a Jammeh, and members of her cabinet and others being really alarmed and dismayed at the language that was used. And I think there's one, Kajol, the member of parliament.
Well, I'm not sure, because I
the
know what's... Oh, okay.
The radar. So the reason I'm referencing that is because people say you're now starting off a trend that members of parliament, who they are now feel satisfied or feel confident that they can use language that is derogatory, that is definitely makes your
So there was, yes, Shanfagujo, well, the headline is Tell Kamala Where to Put the Radar.
Right.
But there was also another incident sometime before, I can't remember why, but it was in response to statements made by the government. Nyan Gatsby-Dolly, former Minister of Education, she had a similar statement where tell the Prime Minister to something, I won't repeat what it is, and I think...
And others like that.
Yes.
And our former Prime Minister is not innocent, okay? But the issue that I wanted to bring here today, the issue with Jammeh and the use of that word referencing the Prime Minister, the discussion is not so much about, and I do think it's important, but it's not so much about are we taking Parliament, bringing Parliament into disrepute? Are we not requiring our members of Parliament who represent our citizenry to uphold a certain standard of decorum? That has been a discussion that has been in the newspaper as far as I can tell. But I do think that what our former Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, said has far more relevance and far more importance when we look at the word Jammeh in the context that he said that it is a question of censorship. I do believe that he's right, and that is what I am here today to speak to. It's not only censorship, but it's selective censorship. And I will be using as reference of that the Telecommunication Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, their Act, Section 9D, I believe it is, as well as the State of Emergency Regulations, Legal Notice 40 of 2026. I will be using those as references to support what I believe that our former Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, In fact, saying as a form of censorship is even saying it mildly. I believe it is a form of stifling dissent, stifling freedom of expression, particularly when it comes to criticizing the political directorate. So it's a very dangerous road to go down, but to say that there's no credibility to that argument, I don't think we can say that, and I do believe that Dr. Rowley was not on the wrong.
And before you go further, I just want to point out, it's not as though you haven't brought up the potential of censorship with regards to Dr. Rowley under the PNM administration. Absolutely. It wasn't necessarily a direct comparison, but there were times when he criticized the Law Association, and I can't remember if he criticized the Media Association directly or if he criticized, but he definitely did at times, was very defensive with reporters and press conferences, right, and directed aggressive statements towards them in the moment. And you brought up these concerns then with regards to, you can't try to silence the media when you're angry.
Right, but what I'm really wanting to say, and I'm not anyways...
Well, just to show that it's not from a bias.
No, but
right.
Not, well, you know, listen, you know, I don't think Dr. Rowley would say that I'm biased in his favor at all. I don't think he would say that, but be that as it may, I am dealing with a broader issue. I started by asking Sean to see if he could pull up that day when, that fateful day in our history, our political history, when A.N.R. Robinson, then President of the Republic, had to make that decision on our Constitution, who was going to form our government. And persons interpreted that to mean that he did not have confidence in the then government, to come back and continue to run the country, and the words that were used are creeping dictatorship. So I am using that speech as a sort of a back point or a reference point to what Dr. Rowley himself said when having dealt with the telecommunications authorities of Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm saying also the state of emergency regulations, I am saying there's a lot of credibility to what he says, that not only is there a form of censorship or attempt to censor the media or persons who make statements that are published in the media, but I would go so far as to stifle political dissent. And why do I say that? Before I go into the reasoning behind it, we know what was said by Dr. Rowley. He referred to our Prime Minister, and that can never be acceptable. So nobody is in any way say that he has. And in fact, when I initially heard that, I said, how could he possibly talk about our Prime Minister like that? So let's put it in context. When it was, at least my understanding, a lot of the discussion was, are you as a parliamentarian or parliament be brought into disrepute and dishonor? Are you, by using that, how far are we prepared to go? When are we going to stop that language that is really not doing any service to the parliament, which is our highest court on in our land, and it has such an important role to carry out? Where will we bring an end to that? And that seemed to be the focus. My response to that is, and I call it to some extent feigned indignation. Yes, it's absolutely not right for Dr. Rowley to refer to our Prime Minister in the way in which he did, but you must remember what your government did. And to be very, you'll say I'm biased now. Yes, you'll say I'm biased now. Because under no circumstances can you compare that statement to what Vanilla Aline Toppin, who was a member of Parliament, she was in the Ministry of Development, Planning and Development, said when they moved a no confidence motion in March 2015. There is no comparison. She did it under the cover of parliamentary privilege. What she said that Rowley was the product of rape, that his father was a rapist, that one of the mothers of his children, that she had conceived by rape. That is not only talking a smear on a person's character, that's criminal. That's a criminal wrongdoing, and she did that. There is no comparison, in my respectful opinion, to call to your then Prime Minister and say that you are the product of rape, that your father is a rapist, and using the cover of parliamentary privilege, because that's what she did in order to make that statement. What was the outcome of that? Wade Mark, who was then the Speaker of the House, said that he accepted her apology and would not take it any further, even though she said that she would not take back what she had said. Now, actually, the issue of parliamentary privilege and the use of parliamentary privilege only underscores the importance of freedom of expression. because in the Parliament, among many functions, you are there to be able to speak and represent your constituents without fear or favor or the concern that you will be taken to court for defamation, which is why I'm sure you're familiar with the term. Say what you said, go and say it outside on the pavement. Say what you said, don't say it in the Parliament, because they very well know Parliament is absolute privilege. So when you say things that you know are not true, you say they are motivated by absolute malice, there's no belief in what you're saying, you are still protected by what they call the absolute privilege of Parliament. And why does that exist? Because I actually have a quotation from, which dealt with judicial proceedings, but Parliament is like a court. You represent your client. And the same way that the parliamentarian, the MP, represents his constituents. And this is what was said many, many years ago in a famous case. And what they said in order to explain why it is this absolute privilege from an action for defamation. And this quoting from the case. The reason of the rule is that counsel, who is not malicious, who is acting very bona fide, may be in danger of having action being brought against him. Even if the rule of law were otherwise, he must, the most innocent of counsel might be unrighteously harassed with suits, and it is better, therefore, that the rule of law is made so large that the innocent counsel shall never be troubled. But he's talking about a situation where the counsel is not motivated by spite. But if you read on that issue, you will know that the protection that is given by using the parliamentary privilege, even when the person speaking is motivated by spite, even when the person speaking does not believe what he's saying, even when the person speaking, as the MP, is motivated by vindictiveness and all of that, you cannot sue him for defamation. And the reason is freedom of expression. So the court says it is better that you make the rules so large that the most wrong-headed persons are able to speak, even where they speak out of a malice, than you prevent them from speaking and representing the interests and the views of the constituents of fear of being taken to court. And so I'm only saying that to say that that's exactly what, when Vanilla Toppin, who was a member of this government, stood up in Parliament in 2015 and called Dr. Rowley a child of rape. And when the then Speaker had to deal with it, he didn't send it to the Parliamentary Committee for Abuse of Parliament, Abuse of Privilege, and send it to the Parliamentary Committee, which meant they could have either asked for to apologize, but that was pretty strong what she said, or they could have suspended her from Parliament, or expelled her. And I think in Singapore, they could even go further than that and actually imprison you, but that's not the norm. They could have expelled her or they could have suspended her. That is not what was done. So if people want to be so outraged by the Prime Minister, who was not even a member of Parliament, who was the former Prime Minister, who did not make a statement in Parliament that referred to our Prime Minister as he did, where is your outrage and your indignation when Vanilla Toppin, Alan Toppin, under the cover of absolute privilege of Parliament, said to Dr. Rowley, under no confidence motion, that he was a product of rape, that his father was a rapist, and that a child that he had was a product of rape. I don't think you can get further than that. I don't think you can get worse than that. And where was the outrage? And why was the leader of the party, which is now in government, not express their concern and distance themselves from that? Because if I remember correctly, when Philip Alexander, he's a member of Parliament, he's a minister in housing.
Yes, he's a minister in the Ministry of Housing, yes.
Right.
But a senator.
Minister.
Yeah.
He's in Parliament, right?
Yes.
And when he talked about India having us in the, if they, but it doesn't matter. The point is she took exception to that.
Well, true.
And she went out in public and condemned it, and she said she spoke to him and that she would not be tolerated that conduct. The point being that there was something she could have done about it. There's something that could have been done about it. And from my personal experience, which I have to draw on, I can't imagine any of us under Mr. Mann, I can't speak of other leaders, being able to go into Parliament, even outside of Parliament, and use that kind of language. I cannot see it. So the issue is, the leadership has to take responsibility.
I just find it interesting. The strongest thing I ever heard Mr. Manning say in Parliament was calling Dr. Rowley a raging bull or a bull in a chant. And I'm like, just think about the level of language. And oh my gosh, he said that about Dr. Rowley.
Right.
But look how much worse things we've heard since then.
And the language always has some sexual connotation. And that's true of Dr. Rowley by his side, because I wouldn't say what he said, but it was terrible. But the issue that I want to bring to the attention of the listener, the issue is not so much, in my respectful opinion, question of parliament and bringing parliament into disrepute, the language that is absolutely unacceptable for parliamentarians to use. I think the real issue is what Dr. Rowley alluded to, question of censorship. There's government censoring and any dissent in their political views. And the reason that before I go on to that, I used Toppin as an example of being covered by absolute privilege of Parliament to be able to accuse Dr. Rowley and his father of the most heinous crimes. Because that's what
well, I mean, he's not really accusing Dr. Rowley. You're kind of just putting the label on him.
Yeah, but he also said that one of his children was a product of rape.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yes, he said that.
Sorry,
and,
yes.
and the young woman had to come out and say that was not true.
Right.
She went very far, you know.
Right.
She didn't go only to the father, you know. She went after Dr. Rowley. And the young lady came out and said it was not true. And Wademark did not suspend her. They did it to the parliamentary committee. She was not suspended. She was not expelled. She was asked to give an apology. And even when she did that, she said that she was not taking back what she had said.
Mm.
So you cannot come to us. That's what my point is. You cannot come to us, you ministers, and have this feigned indignation about what they say about our Prime Minister, which is unacceptable. But you have to look at your own self and see what you did, what was said, and what was done by your government to deal with something that I consider to be even more heinous, more unacceptable than what Dr. Rowley did. I'm not saying what Dr. Rowley did was correct. Please don't say that I did. But he's neither a member of Parliament. And by the way, don't you find it very strange that if in fact you felt that what he said was wrong and there was no truth to what he was saying, that no action of defamation was instigated, why aren't they taking action of defamation if what he said was so defamatory? And they could not rely on Parliament because he did not say it in Parliament. He said it at a media conference. And speaking about...
He had no protection.
He had no protection, so go after him. Why did you go after him that way? So he's not the only... He is not the only one that had used language that is defamatory, that had bringing the Parliament into disrepute, but that is not the issue. We also have our own Prime Minister. I don't know if people remember. I remember it, and I wasn't involved in government and politics at all, but I do remember it with WASA, when they were talking about laying of pipes, and they were saying that there was they were alleging corruption in that 81 million, I don't know if it's US, but $81 million worth of pipes were laying unused that WASA had ordered, and they were not using it, and that had been an issue of corrupt practices of the then government, which was, I think, the PNM. And what did... she said it on the hustling. She did not say it in Parliament. She said, the only pipe I know about is Mr. Bissessa's pipe. So, you know what I mean? It's something doesn't sit well with you taking this sort of umbrage or taking this sort of exception to using that kind of language. But I want to come back to what I started with. I do believe that what the former Prime Minister alluded to, that the issue here is not so much about the abuse of Parliament, bringing the Parliament into disrepute. I'm sure that is an issue, and I'm not saying it's not an issue, but I think the bigger issue is going back to the quotation that I started with from A.N.R. Robinson, that we have to be mindful that slowly, day by day, that it may be eating away at your constitutional right, your freedom of expression, and targeting not just a defamation, but targeting those persons who hold political positions. And why do I say that? Well, one example, and I think Dr. Rowley referenced it, was the Telecommunication Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, where they relied on Section 9D to say they're going to review, at least that's the language I saw in the papers, to review the statement by Dr. Rowley referring to our Prime Minister as a Jamet, as I said. And this is what Section 9D says. It prohibits the transmission of content that degrades or discriminates against persons or groups on the basis of race, origin, class, religion, or sex. So this is the provision that they apparently were going to invoke when they said that they were going to review his statement. Now, why did I believe Dr. Rowley did say this. He said not only censorship, he said it was selective. And I think he has a point. Because if this quotation that I took from Section 9 says that they can prevent transmission of content that degrades or discriminates against persons or groups on the basis of race, origin, class, religion, or sex, what about what the Prime Minister said about the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago? When they came out and supported the opposition leader, that they said they required consultation to determine who should be the next Chief Justice, apparently had not occurred when they came out and said that they appeared to support the President of our Republic, that she was not consulted as required. Our Prime Minister referred to the Law Association members as filth, eater food, dunce, P&M attorneys. You can't get nastier than that, you know. Filth, eater food, dunce, P&M attorneys. She referred by the senators when the senators, independent senators, would not vote in favor of the ZOSA Act. What did she say about our president? She said what she calls a low-grade functionary.
Low-level P&M functionary.
A low-level. Now, if you want to use your Section 9D to go after Dr. Raul, who is not a member of Parliament, who is not the Prime Minister, for using that word, what do you have to say about our Prime Minister referring to the Law Association's filth as dunce, eater food, P&M attorneys, and referring to the President of the Republic as what is a
low-level P&M functionary.
Exactly.
Which I don't think she said it in Parliament, by the way.
I said, what do you have to say about that? Why are you not outraged by that language? Why are you not outraged? You can't say that what our former Prime Minister said, which I'm not defending. I'm not defending it. But if you felt that what he said about the Prime Minister was something that required you to review it because you are allowed, and by the way, the power, and this is where I'm talking about censorship, which is what I suppose Dr. Rowley was alluding to. It's not about an action for defamation. It's to shut you down. Because the telecommunication authorities can prevent the transmission of what you said. It can prevent people from hearing what you had to say. That's a very powerful tool. And when you add that to the state of emergency regulations, which was illegal notice, this is what it had to say. You have to read these things together. And what you said, I asked you to remind me, Cuba.
Right.
Legal notice 2026. What is it? Confers wide powers that could restrict criticism of government and freedom of speech. Because what it says, the key aspect of the regulation says, it makes an offense to behave, I don't know, put it correct, to behave orally or otherwise in a manner intended to, quote, to prejudice public safety, to influence public opinion. And many people took umbrage to the language because it was too general and wide, which gave the politicians the ability to say, well, what you said, well, they took out the public order part, because I think they threatened them with legal action, and they took that, they amended the regulations that excluded the words public order. But what do you mean by public safety? What do you mean by public mischief? It's very broad. And the other criticism that was made, not only the language very wide, but if the intention by the state of emergency was to deal with civil unrest, if that was the intention, why are these regulations focusing on criticizing the government and saying that if you criticize the government, you will pay a price, which can go as far as imprisonment? It has a huge fine. I looked at what the punishment was, and an exorbitant fine or imprisonment. And the criticism was, this is what the criticism was, it has the potential to stifle dissent and can be misused by the government to target criticism of crime-fighting strategies. So when you look at the response of this government in relation to what our former Prime Minister said, why was there not that same level of indignation when worse things were said by parliamentarians, and nothing was said, nothing was done of any substance to reprimand those persons? But more so, why is it that the Telecommunications Authority is using Section 9 apparently to review the statement of our former Prime Minister where he used the word jamming? Why did you not review because you said it recently, why haven't you not reviewed what you said about our president? A low-functioning Anyway, I always forget what the language is, but it's bad enough, right?
Well, to that point, because this one bothers me most of all just because of the sheer frequency of its use and the fact that it was used both in Parliament, including at least once by the Prime Minister, but also on the campaign trail. Because that's the first time I heard it. I don't know if Anna Roberts, referring to Stuart Young and his privates repeatedly with a derogatory term, I mean, obviously it's meant to be an insult, right? Now, at what level is that somehow in a different classification as what Dr. Etheroli said? And again, it wasn't just in Parliament. And in my mind, and I'll get to that in a second, I don't know why parliamentary broadcasts, not parliamentary utterances and what's happening in Parliament. Yes, privilege, protected right. But the broadcasts themselves, at the end of the day, should still have some standards of what's being put out into the public, right? Otherwise, it's rules for thee and not for me. But when Minister Roberts could basically take license to repeatedly display his obsession, I am merely using the standards of one Minister Padarath, his obsession over Stuart Young in a sexual manner. Why was nothing done about it then? What makes what Dr. Rowley said that much worse? And what gets me is, technically speaking, Dr. Keith Rowley is not a threat of facing consequences under that section D9. They were reminding broadcasters of their obligation, which forbids transmitting content that degrades or discriminates. We could have transmitted all the content. Yes, I get it. We have criticized Stuart Young ad nauseum during the election and post-election. So let's make no mistake. This is not the Stuart Young fan club here. It's being fair. During the election and consistently, I, at the very least, has called out Anna Roberts' language, Minister Roberts. Why is it not the same? But more to Karen's point now, it seems as though Dr. Heath Rowley said a thing. He said a thing that was no worse than what has been put out into the public, some of it on the Parliament channel, by others. And what does the Media Association do? They are reminding broadcasters, which means, oh wait, we're going to use this as an indirect way to potentially threaten you. That's how it appears. And it's not necessarily that, yes, there's a great government conspiracy to censor us, right? We don't have evidence of that. But we just say, well, there's smoke here, and there's smoke there, and there's smoke there, and there's smoke there, and there's smoke there. At some point, you would think someone in government would say, hey, let's not do anything to further make it look like we're trying to censor people. You would think that would be something that comes up. Maybe we shouldn't do anything that might look like we might be trying to censor people, because it will only encourage individuals to further believe that we are trying to censor people. And that's assuming that they're not. That's the best possible scenario. That's giving them the benefit of the doubt. Even if I want to, there's way too many incidents that are questionable and not properly explained. And this is the latest one. To what degree is the Telecommunication Authority supposed to be independent? But we've already, on this show, and Karen started the ball rolling with the Police Service Commission. Where is the independence? It is too easy to undermine the independence of our independent institutions, because the closest thing we have is the president appointing people. But I believe the president's term is going to come up in about maybe a year. And then it's not as though the current government is going to appoint a PNM person to be president. Which Karen has come out to say that is an understandable decision.
Yeah.
You
Because
put someone
you know why
to
it's
help.
understandable?
Yes.
Because remember, the presidents help you to carry out policy. You do
Exactly.
not want a president who's fighting you. You want a president who is going to assist you and facilitate, if you're doing the right thing, to achieve your political or your policy decision.
One could say, look, it's 3 SOEs now, and the president has signed off on all of them, right? I mean, she has no choice, but still, she has not tried to voice any sort of dissent or you know, if you disagree with something, you could. There was a situation. There are ways to do it. No, none of that. No fuss, no muss, right? But when they appoint someone from their side of the aisle to be president, which is, again, it is not only expected, it is reasonable, right? the problem is, similar to when we had the past administration, to what extent are we going to believe that the people appointed by the appointed president are going to be wholly independent, right? We have a Rima on the line. We'll take the call. Caller, good morning. You on here?
Sean Michael Small, good morning to you and Mrs. Shera.
Morning.
Morning. So, I want to understand what it is you're saying here this morning, right? Now tell me if I'm going wrong. So, the MPs, the senators, they can stand up in the both houses and say whatever they want about whoever they want, however they want. And legally, we as citizens, we cannot say what we want. I want you to explain to me where the democracy going.
Okay, you want an explanation? Actually, I wrote a book.
Because if we see something wrong,
I think it's
and we talk about it,
okay.
Like with the Samaru killing,
yeah,
that is the inside public disorder. Where are we going as a country? Because I personally find this nonsense has to stop. And you see the words you have on the television, there's standards. This is why we haven't crime. Because when civil society looks on and see the standards set by politicians with the behavior and the words, where you expect the tail to go for following the head. And I want to end with this. I think it's time for that nonsense to stop it. Because you are electing people to represent you. And when they go to the parliament, they don't even consult with you until the next 5 years. They represent the views of the party. But I want to see the party vote for itself. Because this ain't making no sense. Because Minister Sturge can get away with the nonsense that he spoke there. And for me, the word jamet is really bacchanalis. It's not a, it is derogatory, yes, but it's really bacchanalis. Because that's what I see happening here. That's the behavior in Parliament. So what do you expect from the children in school and the people on the side of the road? Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. I'm glad you brought up Minister Sturge because I will always go back to this. Yes, just like how we always went back to meritless, right? We will beat those political dead horses if necessary to not forget certain things. Stand your ground laws. Minister Sturge publicly says, well, if you think the police are fake police, just shoot them. Better to be tried by 12 than carried by 6. To the caller's point. This is our minister saying it in a public consultation, not in Parliament. If a member of the public said that, if a member of the public said right now with these regulations, hey, if you think it's fake police knocking on your door, shoot them. Don't trust them.
That's definitely a threat to public safety.
Is that a threat to public safety, right?
It's definitely a threat.
So it's not something we would want the common citizens to say. Why then? A minister says it. We didn't. All we got was then Minister Roger Alexander, having to come now and try to walk it back in a rather unsatisfactory way, because all too often, whenever a politician has some kind of faux pas, they don't really deal with it. Someone says something in Parliament, and like what you said with regards to the statements against Dr. Rowley, you don't deal with it, right? So then now, your side comes now and has an issue what the other side said. But we could go, probably you could go through time immemorial with examples of, well, when your side said something wrong, you didn't deal with it. Why now you're demanding the opposition or the party against you, we have to deal with it, right? When Stuart Young said what he said to the then opposition leader, Kamala Prasad-Bissessar.
But he did not say it, he said, we did not know the mic was on.
He didn't know the mic was on.
Yes, he was not speaking in Parliament. He was speaking to his colleague, and he did not know that he was being heard.
But the point is, it went out there publicly.
Right.
Right? And we just kind of got an apology and we were supposed to move on. When Dr. Rowley says certain things publicly, sometimes you don't even get apologies, right? When Anna Roberts is basically, apparently, the entire country has given him license to be obsessed with a member of Parliament's private parts. And they have had similar hot mic incidents that also were not dealt with by the current government. right? Most notably, John Jeremy. From what I understood, the implication was it directed at someone on his side? Now someone told me, no, it was directed at a member of the opposition, which technically makes it worse.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make it better.
It doesn't make sense.
Right? So if that's the case, what was done with regards to that? Because why hot mic incidents still go out to the public? Where is the Telecommunications Authority to speak on that?
And that is what I wanted people to take away from this. Because I heard the person who called in and talking about the language and so on. Yes, the language is obscene. Yes, the language is unacceptable. But I think the bigger point is the point that Dr. Rowley alluded to when he had that press conference. He said that it was an attempt at censorship. He said that what they're effectively trying to do is to shut down any voices of dissent. And I am saying that is why I asked that we start the program with A.N.R. Robinson's speech about streams into rivers and rivers into seas, because what I am saying is that whilst people become distracted and focus on who said what, and you shouldn't have said that, and you said, they want you to talk about that, because as long as you're talking about that, you're not talking about the other issue which Dr. Rowley alluded to, the state of emergency regulation, which has nothing to do, apparently, with civil unrest, but has everything to do with shutting down political dissent. Political dissent. Persons who criticize the government are subject to imprisonment, hefty fines. If for reasons of public safety, whatever that means, they are found to be wanting under the regulation. Something is wrong with the Telecommunications Authority selectively going after Dr. Rowley and say they're reviewing the word jamet, and yet the Prime Minister has said, even to my view, equally as bad things, and yet they have said nothing. And the power of the Telecommunications Authority is to shut down the transmission. You won't be able to hear what he said. If you want evidence of a government, which is what A.N.R. Robinson was alluding to, creeping the dictatorship, which he was speaking about the then opposition. I am not saying that's where they're going, you know, but I am saying the amber light is flashing. And while you get distracted talking about what Kajo said, who said what, how bad it is, yes, I'm not saying that is not important, but I of the view that I do believe that what Dr. Rowley said is not only censorship in the broadest sense of the word, but it's persons who want to stifle political dissent, things that are said about this government, and to use either the SOE regulations or the TAT, this legislation, to prevent persons from expressing their political views. And I think that, I just want to end, because even your caller talked about who said what, and so it's not about who said what. That is important, but the real issue is you don't get focused on that. They want you to focus on that. What they don't want you to focus on is that slowly but surely they're eating away at your constitutional rights of freedom of expression. That is what is at risk here. And we have to be mindful that may be what this government may have in mind. I'm not saying they do. I can't say that, but I certainly think that the amber light is flashing. And it says so in relation to what Dr. Rowley himself said, and the fact that TAT failed to go after our Prime Minister when she said, I mean, she couldn't have said anything worse about the Law Association, called them filth. Why they didn't say something about the Law Association, not attorneys independent of each other? It's an association whose role and function is to protect the legal rights, the constitutional rights, and to speak out on it. They have done that on several occasions. So she has done that. She has said very derogatory things about your president, yet why didn't Telecommunications Authority say anything about that? Why are they silent about that? And finally, the speaker did use the word, talked about the word jamet. Yes, it does have more than one meaning. Yes, I did look it up. Dr. Bridget, I can't pronounce her second name, but she has written extensively on all matters of history and local history, and she did look at some point in time at the use of the word jamet. She said that it came from the French word, and it means out of the fringes, standing at the fringes. Yes, in modern times, it's used to speak about a promiscuous woman who's loose and of low morals, but it has a broader meaning. It has a meaning of rebellion. It has a meaning of standing up to the Victorian mores. It has a meaning of standing up and using your voice to be heard. So even the word itself has more than one meaning, and a person who uses that word, when you call somebody that, it doesn't necessarily mean they're loose. It means they are maybe vulgar in their language. Maybe they're abusive in their language. Maybe they say things that probably is not the right way to express yourself, and they do it in a manner that's loud and so on. But it does not necessarily mean that the person is being referring to something of your immorality. So that was another point. So the person did have a point. They spoke to it. The Jamit has more than one meaning. But it does concern me that the discussion is still about who said what and who said. This, in my respectful opinion, coming from no less than a former prime minister, is an issue of selective censorship and moving towards stifling political dissent, which is why the final point I will make, I asked Sean to remind me, I heard him talking about Cuba. I don't know if people remember, because I listened, I listened when our prime minister, when she was speaking in St. Kitts, after she talked about the Summit of America and the Shield and so on, after she spoke about the zone of peace and all that, she spoke about Cuba. You know, she spoke about Cuba, and suddenly she distanced herself from a position that had been taken about Cuba for several years. I looked it up. There's a United Nations, I don't know, the head of that division, and it's at least 20, 30 years that the various governments have come out and expressed their dissatisfaction or opposition to the use of America, of embargoes, and now sanctions to shut down, to show their dissatisfaction with how Cuba, the political directorate of Cuba, is running Cuba. But when our prime minister spoke, she suddenly took a different position that CARICOM had taken, as far as I can recall, and started talking about Cuba and talk about how Cuba doesn't allow freedom. But she didn't use the word freedom of speech, but she alluded to that. But I think that's what's happening here too. And I would say my final word on this, you're laughing, my final word on this, is I hope to bring to the discussion this morning that the use of the word Jamit had less to do with Parliament, had less to do with you said so, now we can say so, had less to do with bringing this honor to the office of a member of Parliament and to the Parliament itself, and more to do with the government using the various tools that's at its disposal to shut down political dissent. That is what I hope to have achieved. And if you take away anything from what I said today, look at what the telecommunication D9 has said. And if you're saying that Dr. Rowley is guilty of that conduct and therefore transmission of what he said should be prevented, you should say that the same thing about the Prime Minister. Why haven't you done that? And even if one does not do that, at least it's intimidation. At very least, people will think twice to criticize this government, and that is the message. Do not criticize this government, else you will end up under the regulations using that, or you'll end up with the TAT coming after you, and you having to, but you have to have very deep pockets. So it's at very least intimidation.
Now, one of the things I want to point out is, ironically, Karen was quoting a quote from an article she herself wrote. And the important thing of this, and the reason why I bring it up, is not to toot our own horn. What is the headline? What is the date? Executive overreach, the new norm, May 27, 2023. It was about the situation with the merit list. It's not as though all of a sudden the government changed and now Karen Estrashera is bringing out, invoking the name of A.N.R. Robinson and 1818 and streams into rivers and rivers into seas because, you know, it's a hate on the UNC Day. No. She used that quote against Dr. Keith Rowley with regards to how he was managing what should have been an independent process, at least at the point that it reached, right? And he was not supposed to have interfered with it. And according to the law and Karen's interpretation, let me just put it that way, right? The president did not necessarily have the capacity to send the list back. So it was the beginning or the creeping of undermining of the process to select the commissioner and independent institutions, particularly around the police service, because the police service is supposed to be independent to the politicians, the police commissioner is supposed to be independent, the police service commissioner is supposed to be independent.
And I actually wrote an article, I went further than that. I wrote an article on the president herself, because I went to the legislation. And what it said is that once the head of the Police Service Commission presents her with the list, she has no authority at all but she has to take that list, prepare the list and send it to Parliament. There's no authority at all. And yet we learned that when the list was given to her, it was handed back to the...
After apparently a meeting.
Right.
Which is not supposed to happen.
But she had
because
no authority to do that.
The Prime Minister was not supposed to be there. That then Dr. Rowley eventually admitted he was at her residence at around the same time.
It's not only that,
right?
If I recall the article now, if I recall, what even makes the argument stronger against the actions of the then president is that I think she had been written to, and I actually got a sample of the actual letter that she sent back to the party, and she said, I have no authority. The only authority I have is the authority given to me under the Constitution.
Right, which was a creature of statute.
I'm a creature of statute.
Which was from a previous situation. And this now seemingly is contradicted.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. And people would say, well, Karen was criticizing the president. Why can't the Prime Minister criticize the current president? Because Karen waited until after the president did a thing. And showed to a satisfactory degree, not necessarily proven in a court of law, but showed in the court of public opinion, at the very least, hey, I'm kind of contradicting my own self here. And that's what Karen is bringing up. You did a thing that contradicted your own self. I have a problem with that. The Prime Minister, she insulted the president before the thing occurred. Somewhat de-incentivizing anyone from wanting to potentially give the government the benefit of the doubt on the matter at hand, which was the social legislation. Right? But I wanted to bring it up to point out, it's not as though all of a sudden there's a new level of criticism that Karen is dipping into because she's a PNM for life and she would never say something like this with regards to Dr. You know, she used the same quote. She used the same quote and made a similar argument. Now, the manner of which she's arguing we are on a slippery slope with regards to undermining our democracy, it's different issues. But it's the same argument of it being undermined step by step, little by little. If the public is not willing to be aware of the situation, it could go unnoticed until it's too late. And then we will, oh my gosh, how did we get here? I don't understand. Right? Now, that's the thing with censorship is, it's a slippery slope that you rarely, it's similar to the independence in the police service. These are the kind of things that they actually end up at the same endpoint. And we're not saying that it's necessarily meaning to get there, but you have to guard against it, and that is dictatorship. That's how it happens. If you go time immemorial, what do? You start to censor the media, you control the narrative, you control law enforcement, you control the power and authority of the state and figure out ways to bend it to your will. One of the other tools of the trade, tricks of the trade, emergency powers for an extended period of time, and the emergency is never solved, so we must extend the powers and go further with the powers and increase the powers, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, you know what? This emergency is never going to end, so I should be dictator for life. You know who did that first? Julius Caesar.
I didn't know that.
Yes, dictators were actually supposed to be, we have an emergency, you have all the power of the government for a short time frame to deal with the emergency. And then he just decided not to give it up. And that was the first instance, and then history is replete with...
At least I had a problem. They had the Arab Spring. Remember the Arab Spring?
I mean, technically, Saddam Hussein, not our local minister, but from Iraq, it was a similar situation. Germany, I won't say who, but you know who, it was a similar situation. Emergency powers never left. Never left. And all of a sudden, you finagle the law enough and you take it incrementally, and the population will go along and chug along with it until it's too late. And then we would like to say in hindsight, oh no, I would have saved Anne Frank. No, it doesn't work that way. Once you see society move a certain way, you will conform. And Karen is saying, maybe we should be aware of things up front. So. Now, the conversation takes a turn because somebody messaged the studio and they have something that says contradicts what it is that we're saying here today. So it's a video clip of, I believe, the Prime Minister's statements, public utterances in response to the Dr. Rowley's claims about censorship. So let's just, or Dr. Rowley's use of the word Jamet. So let's just take the clip and see what.
Yeah, after demitting office, former Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley returned to the public spotlight, hosting a media conference from his Carenage home. But what began as a reflection on his time in office quickly ignited into controversy. During the briefing, Dr. Rowley used a colloquial term widely regarded as derogatory to describe sitting Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar. The colloquial term of French etymology often connotes with promiscuous, loud, or disrespectful women. The remark drew swift condemnation from members of the United National Congress, with several MPs denouncing the language as disrespectful and inappropriate. However, response from within the opposition has been largely muted, except for Member of Parliament for Trinity Maloney, Camille Robinson-Regis, who defended Dr. Rowley and accused the government of hypocrisy. She argued that political discourse in Trinidad and Tobago has long included similar exchanges from both sides. But what about the target of the remarks? In response to TV6 News, Prime Minister Persad-Bissessar dismissed the comments. She said, quote, "It may seem on the surface that I am unbothered when Rowley and the PNM trolls say these nasty things about me, but the truth is that deep down inside, I'm very, very, very unbothered," end quote. The Prime Minister also confirmed she is not considering legal action against Dr. Rowley or any media houses that carried the statement. Meanwhile, the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago says it is reviewing the broadcast of the remarks and has cautioned stations to adhere to content standards, warning that regulatory action may follow.
Okay, to see TV6. Now, it was sent in by a viewer via message, and I believe their point is at the end there, I am unbothered, I am not trying to censor. That is the utterances. But on some level, viewer,
what is that supposed to prove?
What I think.
Sorry, I don't mean any disrespect, but what is the point, though?
Yeah, it does. I'm trying to figure out how to put this, because essentially, are we supposed to go, well, once a politician says, I'm not doing a thing, that is literally sacrosanct. We take them at their word, because according to the PNM administration, there were a lot of things that the public accused them of that they weren't doing. That we weren't satisfied with them just saying, oh, we're not doing X, or we're not doing Y.
And what do you expect her to say? I mean,
exactly.
All due respect to the Prime Minister, she's going to say, you know, what they're saying is right? Obviously, she's going to say it's not true, but where's the proof that it's not? I mean, she has said many, and as I said, and I have been corrected about that, so let me take the correction in advance. The Prime Minister has gone on record and said very harsh things about our own president. You don't think that is wrong? You don't think the telecommunications, who are supposed to protect people from being discriminated against, don't you think they should have taken umbrage to that and investigated our Prime Minister? Don't you think that was wrong when the Prime Minister called the Law Association filth? I mean, I was shocked, to tell you the truth. I was shocked. So don't you think that is wrong? So how does that, and then when she went after the independent senators.
Just the Law Association, she called them PNM lawyers, right?
Yeah, she called them PNM. So specific, she said they were PNM lawyers.
I don't know if you are so very, very, very unbothered by things that PNM trolls say. If you were then, because PNM lawyers, that would be in league with PNM trolls, right?
And they would
Why would you call them filth if you're very unbothered? Can't you just ignore the Law Association then? Why did you have to respond in a very personal, derogatory manner that didn't actually speak to whatever the issue was that the Law Association brought up?
And you know what that says? And the Prime Minister, listen, I have nothing against the Prime Minister, but just as what Sean is saying, when Dr. Rowley was there, I don't think I was on his list of favorite people. So I tried to, as much as I...
you ran against them. So, just saying.
But the point about it, I try as much as possible to be as independent and objective. Even if my view is not correct, I try as much as possible to do that. So where was that? Where was the telecommunication? Because you see, when you do not shut that down, it just grows and grows and grows. And,
yes.
And the Prime Minister has said things there that, I mean, why would you go after the independent senators, saying that the independent senators, somebody was offered money to vote against or to vote in favor of ZOSA?
They wanted some sort of consideration for votes for the ZOSA bill.
So however nice it was put, right? Why did you shut that down? I mean, that's a serious allegation. You're not talking about them as individuals, but members of Parliament and of the upper house. Why hasn't the Telecommunications Authority, which I imagine they're function is to ensure that people are not brought into, you don't discriminate or degrade members of our
wait, now this goes further, right? Because the caller from Arima was pointing out, well, essentially, parliamentarians could get away with things that we can't get away with. And yes, to some extent, parliamentary privilege exists. You explained it to me yesterday. It's in order to ensure that the democratic process is not constrained by certain things, right? Cool, because you're representing people and you need to be free to talk at least at a certain level. But the Prime Minister recently, and this is what got the whole Jamet talk started, right? Basically called out the PNM being beneficiaries of crime, right? And it's crime money that built Balize House. Don't mind that that building has been in construction for I don't know how many years. There have been buildings that basically overtook it, right? That's how long it's been taking. But they have the bottomless pit of transnational crime to finance it. It's been too long in construction, by the way, to the point where I think it's probably costing them money because it's not finished. But anyway, but that's not the point. So she says this in Parliament and calls the PNM and basically says things to imply the PNM are criminals in league with drug dealers, are pedophiles, etc., etc. Now, what's to prevent it is not the normal laws of the land, but the mechanisms of Parliament, like, say, the presiding officer, in this case, the Speaker of the House. Speaker of the House basically looks at the opposition leader, who is essentially saying, she is insulting us. Please stop it. And the Speaker says, well, the insult is not directed at any one of you. So you are using the wrong standing order to protest.
Why did they say that? Because my understanding of the defamation, yes, you can't make a broad statement.
It was in Parliament.
Okay, so they have a parliamentary privilege.
Right, so
but parliamentary privilege is not exclusive to the powers of TAT.
Right, so
TAT could have independently of Parliament still taken action.
Because this is on the Parliament channel. It was broadcasted, right? By the way, we aren't broadcasting on the airwaves, and apparently we are still subject to TAT. Right? So even if the parliamentary channel is not being broadcast on the airways, although I suspect it is, maybe it's not, maybe it's only internet, right, and cable providers, why is it not? But because the opposition used a standing order, and apparently the standing order has the language of saying directed to one person, the Speaker said, well, I can't do anything about it, it's not directed.
Let me just, as a lawyer, and I have to be careful, but if you identify a group, a small group, it is equivalent to identify an individual. So if you said Trinidadians, obviously that's way too broad. But if you say
PNM?
Well, even if you say PNM, it might be a little too broad. But if you say PNM members of Parliament,
right,
you might have reduced the group of people to whom you are referring to say that it is not true to say it's too general for you to say you cannot bring an action for defamation. Because you can bring an action for defamation. As far as I can recall, having done that
area, it was in Parliament.
It was in Parliament. So I do not know that the Speaker's response is that it was too wide a statement to say that he could take action. If the group is sufficiently identifiable and sufficiently restrictive, even if it's made up of 10, 20 people, what you're saying, see, all those members of Parliament who are PNM, they are all involved in drug dealing, they're all involved in whatever. That is definitely could be seen as defamation, and definitely something for which the Speaker has the power to either call for an apology, call for the Privileges Committee to look at the matter and investigate it, and either suspend or expel members.
So ironically, Stuart Young brought up something in that session with regards to Minister Munilal being a member in a case, right? Now, I believe it's technically a civil matter, it's a lawsuit, but it's in the realm of corruption, right, in a sense. But he brought up a case, and because he specifically named Minister Munilal, it was an issue that he wanted the statement withdrawn, I believe. Now, I get it. Technically, the Speaker might be correct, but when you look at the situation, MP Young says a thing which is accurate with regards to the public record. The case exists, and I don't believe it's been settled. Otherwise, Minister Munilal could have said that case has been settled and dealt with long ago, right? Whereas the government, the Prime Minister, is essentially hurtling either insults or unsubstantiated accusations at the opposition bench, and nothing is being done. What are members of the public supposed to believe? Now, if you're a supporter of the government, that's fine, you're happy for it. You're not necessarily thinking, oh my gosh, this is technically still unprofessional. If you're not supporters of the government, what are you left to believe? And you don't have to be a PNM supporter to be not a supporter. You could be an undecided voter, somebody in the middle, right? You could be an objective observer, somebody in the middle. What are you supposed to believe in that situation, even if the speaker is technically correct? And then we have other examples of the apologies being very, 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 very minor, downplaying the severity of the incidents on both sides. I mean, listen, Jamet is open to interpretation. Is small pen open to interpretation when it's directed at somebody specifically? And this was done in Parliament also by the Prime Minister. She seems very unbothered by what Stuart Young has to say. Very unbothered, right? According to Barry Patterath, based on her one lone utterance of a statement directed at the private anatomy of a member of Parliament, she is obsessed with it, right? According to Barry Patterath, this is his logic.
Oh, he said, okay.
This is his logic. When Nandat Swidoli said one thing about the Prime Minister, he asked, you seem to be obsessed with people's bodies. Well, by your logic, Prime Minister apparently is obsessed. You see, now, if you dealt with everything professionally, it wouldn't look as though you're self-contradicting yourself. But my wider point is the stuff that goes on in Parliament is not actually dealt with properly by the mechanisms of Parliament. It could be that the speakers and the President of the Senate doesn't feel that they have the leeway or the independence to do what must be done, and maybe they try their best, but it always comes across, eventually, sooner or later, that it's rules for thee and not for me, because they always understand better the intentions of the government and always assume the worst with regards to the opposition. And we called this out in the previous administration as well, when the roles were reversed. And because of that now, it's very hypocritical for TAT to let all of this go out on the air. And the analogy is like this. Imagine if there's a police officer and 50 cars are speeding down the highway, going at 140. You come, you also drive at 140. But you are the 51st car. Now we're going to stop you and write a ticket. What about the rest of them? Granted, you're doing the wrong thing. You're supposed to be held to account for that. But it does feel somewhat unfair that, hey, all of this is going to pass just before me, and now you're going to single me out?
Yeah, and I think that whole issue, let me just say with the parliamentary privilege, understandably, persons are given a certain amount of leeway to say things that they couldn't possibly say outside on the what they say on the pavement, right? Yeah. Because you want the representative, whether it is in judicial proceedings and you represent your client, to be able to say things that he would not otherwise be able to say because he would be faced with an action for defamation. The same thing applies to Parliament. So the leeway that is given to members of Parliament to say things that look as though they are vindictive, spiteful, malicious, and perhaps not believed by the person making those statements is not to be able to bring an action for defamation, because what you're doing is stifling dissent, what you're doing is stifling criticism and your ability as a member of Parliament to represent your constituents. But there is a remedy, and the remedy is the Parliamentary Committee, Privileges Committee, which has the power to order you to give an apology, order you to, they can either investigate the complaint, have you apologize, or, as I said, suspend you for a certain number of sessions of Parliament, or go the furthest and expel you. So that the idea behind Parliament is not to stifle dissent. You want them to be able to say what they could normally say in the interest of the freedom of expression. What I think is the concern here is that when the Prime Minister said what she had to say, it appeared that the Telecommunications Authority, which is a statutory body, which is independent of Parliament, Parliament has its own rules. Why has it been silent? Yet when the former Prime Minister says something, he does not have the cover of parliamentary privilege because he's not a member of Parliament. Yet the Telecommunications Authority takes umbrage at that and says they're going to review what he said. If you're going to review what he said, you've got to review what our Prime Minister has said, because there's no question in my mind that our Prime Minister has said some very I mean, concerning matters that the Telecommunications Authority should look into and investigate under its powers, and yet they have not.
But let's go wider. If now Parliament is a free-for-all, right? Because the various speakers of the House is not keeping things professional, not keeping things professional enough. And there have even been times when the speaker has lost control and had to admonish their own party, just saying. Or at least gave clues to their public displeasure, but they couldn't actually make it that public. We won't get into that. I don't necessarily want to bring that up, but there was something in the...
Yes, I remember it.
Right? Now, think about now where has political discourse reached. Because some people will say, oh, Dr. Rowley is sexual innuendos all over the place. It's not just him. It's like all of them. We had Zami, we had Take Your Little Man, we had Small Pin, we had Jamet. And that's what we've heard. Because some would say or claim if you go there in person to be an observer of Parliament, you would hear so much more. Why does it seem as though parliamentary discourse is no better than a rum shop where we reach a point now we can't debate on issues, we can't actually form any sort of reasonable arguments or stances, it's all based on our political agendas, so we're left to hurling sexual insults at each other as though it's secondary school children. I don't understand how this is seen as acceptable. And the things that I just said, two were said by members of the PNM or former members, and two were said by members of the current government. So it's not as though it's one side or the other. And why is it to Karen's point, she didn't necessarily want to go there, but it's a point that I made earlier. You can't use, well, they said it, so I could say something back. That's not how this works, right? And then now it makes Tat's position, right? And listen, maybe Tat is just saying, look, we have to start somewhere. The situation is going out of control.
Why only that?
Right?
Why they saw them, though?
But then why only? Yes, why only list that, right? But the point is, if both sides are doing it, are we really going to just limit the admonition to one side? And why does that make it justifiable? The fact that members of the public are so willing to excuse their side, whichever one it is, just tells me it's more about winning the argument than actually trying to do the right thing, right? And I said this yesterday, you get what you pay for. And for those that are undecided voters that say, well, we're not involved in this, we have no dog in this fight, that's my point there. You're not involved, you're not speaking out. Yes, you are paying for it. You're paying for it with regards to things you disagree with where public money is being spent, right? You get what you pay for. You're uninvolved, you have no input, you get what you pay for. You get less than zero at this point.
You know what I think though? You can't deal with it. The leadership, if the leadership puts on effort and says, you see when you come in Parliament, because I'm sure it's the same way with the UNC, before you go to Parliament, they have their caucus, decide who's going to speak, what the topic is going to be. You're going to go through that exercise so that you have an opportunity at any meeting to say, listen, we're not to go down that route. And as I said to you, talking from my own personal experience, I can't recall anyone in Mr. Manning's government, I'm not talking about the party, Mr. Manning's leadership, that used the Parliament to make statements that were of a sexual nature, of a derogatory nature, whilst they were in Parliament. And I don't think it would have been allowed. I don't think any of us who were members of the cabinet would have dared to go into the Parliament and use language which the Prime Minister was not prepared to use. So you set the tone. You can deal with it. When Vanilla Toppin said what she had to say, why didn't you condemn it and tell her that it's not acceptable?
Now the thing is, to the Prime Minister's credit, because I do not remember Dr. Rowley ever doing this. Yes, he has potentially disciplined his members of cabinet in other ways for other things, not going there. When it comes to speech and unprofessional speech and derogatory remarks, or in this case, remarks that are distasteful, the Prime Minister, as Karen pointed out, did pull up Minister Alexander, Philip Alexander, pull up his socks a little bit, right? Now, on one hand, that is a point for Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar over her predecessor. The flip side is the point that Karen was making at the time, unfortunately, is also, well, you've shown that you can do it there. Why can't it be consistent and you do it moving forward at all the times that it is potentially necessary? Because at the end of the day, one of the things that bothers me is when they want to say, well, they did it, and they did this, and they did that, or whatever. Yeah, but when you yourself, both sides, has somewhat of an inconsistent at best track record of dealing with their own statements that are unprofessional, how is it then now that we're going to take you seriously when you want to speak about your political opponents and their unprofessional behavior? It rings hollow, right? So again, you do the right thing because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. You don't know when, oh, we do the right thing. We clean up our act. If they want to be dirty, that's fine. We will let them look bad in compared to us, as opposed to trying to now have to put all this effort to convince people, no, they're the bad ones, we're the good ones. Don't mind the fact that we did the same thing.
But I come back to what we started with, and I keep focusing on that, and I don't think the discussion that we're having about the Prime Minister, the former of Dr. Rowley using the dual jamet. Well, I think the real issue is that the censorship, and we have to be concerned that the government is not using these instances to shut down any criticism of it.
At the semi-finals, I believe it was before the finals, Calypsonians are complaining.
Yes.
They're censoring us, they're censoring political compositions. Now, we don't necessarily want to just say, oh, well, the claim is made, surely it must be true. You don't want to run with claims just like that.
It was in the newspaper,
right? The newspaper ran it, right? It could, listen, at times, 10 spots, 40 people at that level of the competition, you know, a lot of people aren't going to make it to the finals. Okay, cool. Now we're in the finals, and you have a mute mic incident. A similar situation, the then UNC in opposition complained about TTT. Now they're trying to defend TTT and using the situation that they complained about then as a justification of why it's innocent and we shouldn't complain and shouldn't suspect of anything. And I'm not saying that it was outright censorship. I'm just saying when someone brings up an accusation, the last thing you want to do is do anything that risks leaning into the accusation further, right? Unnecessarily. It might have been a technical error by TTT, but unfortunately, it didn't look good.
Can you explain what the issue is?
Well, Mr. Francis, he had his political composition. It was the audio was fine live, but it didn't go out on the broadcast, right? And then, of course, now the speculation was, well, they muted him on purpose, right? And the thing is, when a similar situation happened to then opposition leader Kamala Persad-Bissessar, the UNC said something to the tune of, well, that was very convenient, that her speech was somehow, you know, it wasn't broadcasted properly. There were technical difficulties right that she was going to speak. There were no other difficulties for the event. It was the Diwali Nagar, I think it was, right? And it's a similar thing. Because you complained in that manner with regards to what happened to your political leader at that time, why is the standard not translated? So it comes across as hollow, right? But again, it could have been a genuine error. It could have been just how the Calypso process the competition went. Cool. The problem is it's not the only time. Right. If you have too many, and then you come now with state of emergency legislation where I can't remember if they were the ones or if it was a third party that went after the more open-ended clause in the PNM state of emergency that what the court said, no, this is too...
You want on public order?
Yes, on public order.
Public safety and public order, and they took out the words public order.
Right.
Also amended the regulation.
Right. But look, it appears how it appears. And if it was one instance, fine. It was one time, probably nothing. 2 times, probably nothing. 3 times, I'm starting to get wary. 4 times, so on and so on and so on and so on. When the Minister of Homeland Security is saying, well, we want to stop people from putting certain things on social media and potentially even alluding to trying to go after critics.
On the grounds of public safety and public interest, so therefore it has a political connotation. That is what it speaks to.
Because make no mistake, in the UK, let's not forget, we take our government, yes, from Canada, but it's part of the whole Westminster system, right? English common law. In the UK, people have been arrested for criticizing police on Facebook. Not slandering police, criticizing police. So let's not make mistake. English common law has some precedents we don't necessarily want to see applied here. And it potentially can be applied here if we don't necessarily, you know, do anything about it or make ourselves aware of how far it goes and have some kind of pushback. We have a call on the line and we take some comments after. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Morning, Sean.
Morning.
And your guest. Just a few things. I want to get in conversation, but it has been dangerous. One of the things I just live by is their leaders, followers, and those who look on. And the dangerous thing about like your panel there, when you try to go through it in a fine-teeth comb by saying, all right, this one said that, but they wasn't in a position. Because I guess just say that, the Zami thing, they didn't say it directly to nobody, but they say it, they say it about somebody.
Well,
and another thing is that we do disrespect our leaders in a high way, which is dangerous and all. We have to understand they are the people that lead in the country. They are elected by people. Not everybody could talk, but the reason why people talk outside is because they don't have the opportunity to go in the parliament and say, well, that wasn't right. Even though somebody say, that is all right, I agree with it. It don't matter to me. But when you listen to the discussion about everybody, the discussion, and you try to take it to the fine-teeth comb, that is what make it dangerous. Everybody could brush it off. Everybody could brush it off. And I will tell you one thing though, another thing I should say. A woman scorn. You know what they say about that. So when you hear a woman talk about another woman, it is most dangerous and all too. Another thing I want to say and all too was, remember when Camille Regis Robinson begat herself in hot waters with the 95 or 94,000 money that come off on the bank, and Dr. Rowley tried to defend that. You remember what he said? He had said that he don't trust first citizen because them who would bring out with that money thing, right? And he said he don't trust them. That if he had to go and use their card to go and buy panty for his wife, you remember that?
He bought his what? I don't know. He remember he said if
he had to go and buy that for his wife, everybody going to. So it's dangerous. And remember his leader and all who know him for how many years turn and tell people, be careful. Be careful. I don't want to go into all the details. Okay?
Yeah.
And it's very, very dangerous. We must not be going into fine-teeth comb to say who said this and why should who said know the character. The character is like that. He is a person. Do discriminate in that way, especially to women. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cole. Although I will say this, I will replace a woman's scorn with a politician's scorn, because there are many male politicians who, once scorned, act very aggressive in their retort, and I'll just put it that way. I want to attribute that to just a gender. I wouldn't limit it to any one particular gender, at least not what we've seen out of the politics, right?
Yeah, but I do think he does have a point when, from Dr. Rowley, from his utterances, he said, I can't tell you what man to put in your bed. I mean, a lot of the commentary that does come from Dr. Rowley, I have to say, it has a sexual background. Something about something she can't. You know that thing about a dog and a cat?
The thing is, caller,
he uses language that's very sexual and derogatory.
We have another call, but I just want to say this. I'm not sure if I fully understand the point you're trying to make. And it's not that we want to go with what was said as a fine-tooth comb. We are pulling examples, though, right? Because the sheer volume, they're public persons, they are elected, they're supposed to be held to a higher standard. And if it's about volume, right, that doesn't make it better or you know, well, it's just so much, we can't deal with every instance. The point is, it's not technically supposed to happen at all. right? And what Dr. Rowley did, I guess on some level, yes, he kind of got away with it at some point because he was like that so often.
Too often.
We just started to just, well, that's just the way it is. And really and truly, Karen in the last 4 years has been pushing back against that.
Yes,
at the very least, right?
He talked about this about the law and how you see the golf course and all man. He talked about, no, because I find a lot of what he says.
We have a caller.
Okay, so I just want to say with Dr. Roy, too much of what he says has a sexual connotation.
Yeah, but a lot of other parliamentarians also.
They learn from him.
Yeah, well, maybe it's all of them together. We have Clarkson Bailey line caller. Good morning, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning to Sarah and Sean. Yeah, you know, we complain about politicians and the things they say and all kind of thing. You know, but the thing is that Miss Bissessa has been saying all kind of thing, and you know one thing with her, she do apologize. She never apologizes. As a matter of fact, if you say anything about Indian, everybody jump out. But you could say the worst thing about African people, nobody jump out and say nothing. And that is not good for this country. You understand? We have to start seeing things as it is. You can't be telling me that she is able to say what she wants to say, do what she wants to do. Nobody says nothing. But as soon as somebody else says something, which is like African, you have a problem with that. The other thing is that, do we really want to solve crime? The same leader that we have today is talking about we become a lawless dump. Sean and Mr. Sherrod, you could watch in that party and see so many people with so much as spots and wrinkles, and they are in parliament sitting down today. And I just always like to say, I am not a person who went any secondary school, right? I using my natural common sense and my eyes, and I seeing all this. So you want to tell me that people who is educated like Sean and Mr. Shera and many others are not seeing these things? How the hell are we going to end up solving crime? When people are looking and seeing that the same people who is in parliament are people who actually condoling crime. That is what's going on. These people are condoling crime because you cannot tell me that they don't have no righteous person in this country, or you don't have people who is better than these people that you could put in parliament. The most honorable place to talking about the honorable house, we have these kind of people in parliament, and you know that it seems like it don't bother you, Sean, it don't bother Mr. Shera, it don't bother nobody. But if it's in PNM, you'll find, and you know the thing about that, PNM will come and say, recuse yourself or to step aside. But these people have no way of stepping aside and letting the case be heard so that people can say, yes, they're clean. You understand? We cannot stop crime if these things happening every day. They are right in front of us. It come like the politicians is part of the problem, not part, is big problem. The judiciary and the police and all these entities, if they don't get their act together, we're not going to stop crime. These people come like the facility in crime. They are doing crime itself right in front of our eyes. And these things have to stop. We need more people to speak out on this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Okay, first, technically, I agree. The previous administration didn't have a crime plan. The current administration says they have a crime plan. All they've shown us is states of emergencies, which is they have already said, the Minister of Defense has said, it is not a crime plan. Neither administration has a crime plan. Different approaches, same results, feels as though both are somewhat complicit or complacent with regards to crime. I'll just say this. I have, long before today, questioned, do we have the best and brightest in Parliament? Do we have actual people of better quality than the average, of great qualities to lead us, to make these critical decisions in hard times when it's not easy what the right thing is to do when it comes to governing the country? I have questioned it on multiple occasions, but I didn't question it with regards to one party, which at some point, sometimes I thought you were speaking generally, and others I thought you were directing it to one party. I have more than once brought that up with regards to elected officials on a whole. That's all of Parliament, both parties, the independent bench even if necessary, as well as local government representatives, the THA, etc., etc. All I have questioned, because it seems as though the best and brightest of us go away for greener pastures. They don't actually want to start or enter into politics and deal with all of the bacchanal. All of the bacchanal that, not just that, we are like, oh my gosh, Pekong is waiting. The Pekong is going too far. It's not just Pekong anymore. And it's turning a lot of bright young people off, right? Now, there was a window after the election when things were looking up. I wonder if the young people who were considering it are still considering a life in politics anymore, at least for positive motivations. We do have San Fernando on the line. Last call, San Fernando. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning, Karen.
Morning.
Let me first say this before or pronounce this before I go ahead. The Dictionary of the English Creole of Trinidad and Tobago. What it says under Jamet. A type of carnival mass for men and women considered highly obscene and vulgar. Right? And I'm starting there. That is the behavior of a lot of the parliamentarians. And just what you just said, Sean. They are supposed to be at a higher standard than the average person. But this is what we get a lot of times in the parliament. Jammit behavior. According to what I just read here. And for the third time, I said this on your program already, Sean, for the third time under a UNC government, Mr. Pandey, Ms. Pasal Bisesa, and Mrs. Pasal Bisesa again, they have tried their best to stifle free speech in Trinidad and Tobago once they perceive it against them. They have all tried it with the Attorney Generals, Mr. Maraj, Mr. Ram Logan, and now Mr. Jeremy. And weaponizing institutions like that is just another step further into the same agendas that they have executed once they're in power. So mark my words, this is nothing new to us. This is nothing new under the sun. This is just the playbook, advancing the playbook. It's just advancing the playbook. And Trinidad and Tobago, you have to stand up and speak out. Whether they bring a regulation in a state of emergency, so what? We have to tell them what we have to tell them. We don't have parliamentary privilege. But we have our voices and we have to say it out. Have a good day, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, caller.
I want to thank that caller. And the reason I am thanking that caller because he actually summed up what I tried to do today. He summed up that the focus really is on what they're trying to put the focus on, whether you should use that word, who used that word before, and all of, the whole issue of that. The issue
the minor parts.
That's right. The issue is that the use of the word Jamet, which they're using that as the foundation for the argument, really an attack and a continued attack on censorship by this government to prevent any sort of criticism of what it does. And I'm saying that what I hope to have achieved this morning, and I hope that I'm wrong, I don't know that I'm wrong, if looking at the state of emergency regulations and also looking at the powers given to TAT, if we have reason to believe that we are looking at a creeping, well, I have to be careful because they have powers, and next thing they say that I say that this government is a creeping dictatorship. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that that was the perception of what people said when E.N.R. Robinson gave his famous speech, that what he was saying about the then government, that if he didn't look carefully, that is where we were going. And all I'm saying today is that the comment that Dr. Rowley made regarding his media media interview, that I do think there's value to what he said, and we need to be careful that we're not heading down that road, that Trinidad and Tobago being distracted with the whole argument, what is a jamet, who said this, who said was, yeah, all of that is true, and that's a distraction. The real thing we have to look at is those state of emergency regulations, the powers of that, and whether they be used selectively or be used to stifle any dissent or political objection that people may have at how this government is functioning. That is what we need to look at.
In any system of government, this is not limited to democracies. Although we use these terms primarily with democracies because they're not practiced verbally in communist systems of government. You have conservatism and you have progressive. Conservatism is about stability, because you don't want to do too many crazy things and destroy your society by trying to take things too far and make too many changes too soon, too much. But you need a progressive mindset in order to not be stagnant. So it's a balancing act. But somewhere along the way, at least in the United States, some liberals started to believe in the moral superiority of their position. And they went from being proponents of free speech, a tool to ensure civil rights, right, historically, to being proponents of censorship. Because now when you start to think that your side has an automatic moral superiority, not a moral superiority intrinsic to the issues and to the reasoning and the logic on certain social issues, but just a moral superiority in general, and the reasoning is surface level because you can't question it because it has a moral superiority. All of a sudden, the side that were champions of free speech became the de facto proponents of censorship. And the side that was potentially against free speech for however many decades, all of a sudden was forced to be proponents of free speech. Because one side, or rather one generation of activists, started to believe in a moral superiority as opposed to put any work with regards to the issues. And it led to a very upside down situation. But the key point is, the reason why is that when you start to think that you are morally superior than the other side, not because you have better arguments, but just because of the side you're on, all of a sudden, don't question what we have to say. How dare you disagree with us? And then that became where media started to get censored, comedians started to get cancelled. And granted, yes, there are times when you do want to tell people, hey, there's certain things you can't say. There has to be some leeway for responsible thought. But at the same time, you can't stifle anything just based on what you like or don't like. So to me, part of the risk is if people start to think in the moral superiority of one political party over the other, then all of a sudden it's not censorship, it's just doing the right thing. But to what extent now do we realize that we are allowing shallow arguments? Oh, well, these also will solve crime. Oh, well, we'll find the money. And instead of saying, no, we want to go deeper, we want proper explanations, we want you to tell us what exactly is our relationship with the United States, how far does this go, what is your foreign policy position, what are your plans for the future, not just some conceptual revitalization plan, not just the last budget we got where you didn't include a major large expenditure that is actually greater than the deficit that you presented to us. You just decided not to include it. We need you to explain things to us, to manage our expectations, to lead us. Why do we need all these taxes and fines? Why do we need all of these measures? Why do we need another SOE? How exactly is this different from all the previous SOEs? Where is that? Because we run the risk at some point people are going to think, oh, well, they're right, the other side is wrong. We'll stop questioning. And again, it goes to what Karen said. When you stop questioning now because you believe in a moral superiority, you accept surface level discourse. You don't actually go into the details. You don't care to learn more about the issue. all of a sudden, it's a lot easier to pull the wool over your eyes.
So I think that was a fantastic analysis. I listened to you, and you made a really good point, because what you're really saying, I assume that what you may have been alluding to is that this current government is seen to have a moral superiority.
Because of the election, and
right,
yes.
And yes, and therefore they don't have to justify or explain why what they're saying is accurate, and in a sense that's a form of censorship, because they're making allegations without supporting the allegations. But I do think it's being rooted, because using the example that you would have alluded to with the taxes, when you talk about the inheritance tax, people then, they now show you said this then, but now you change your position. When you talked about the motor vehicle taxes, you said this at that time, but then we come with...
It always was, when the PNM inflicted a greater financial burden on the public, it was immoral. But when they do it, it's necessary.
And they were convinced at the beginning.
When the PNM wanted to shortchange labor negotiations, it was immoral. But when they do it, it's necessary. Because the PSA got 10%, nobody else got 10%. Now, consistency. And if you can't be consistent, explain. I said this at the start of the show. It's not necessarily about what they're doing. It's about the inability to explain it to us in reasonable terms. Because if it's reasonable, why can't you explain it? If it's reasonable, why couldn't the Minister of Defense explain how and why we support the United States with regards to Venezuela? To some extent, Karen and I didn't have an issue on the basic premise of, well, if they're going to deal with the transnational crime, we like the support. But obviously, if you said it's not about regime change, so explain when they took Maduro exactly what was going on there. And the lack of explanation, and not allowing people to question, right? I mean, one could argue it started from the budget itself, or even before, but the budget was one of the key...
I think CPAP was the beginning of it all, because I think that the people who worked in the CPAP and URP program did not expect that they would, up to now, they don't have a job, and I think they felt that they were going to be protected by this government.
But here's the thing with the budget. They basically got away with, well, the ministers don't actually have to say anything. So we don't actually have to give details on what the Minister of Finance said. We'll just wind things up when we feel like it. And to some extent, I guess because it was the PNM opposition that was the greatest voice of criticism of that moment, it was seen as less significant or less important, because you were judging the message on the messenger and not on the basis of what we could see with our very own eyes as factual, chronological actions done in public view that we could have assessed on our own merit if we took the time to go into the details ourselves and not just take the surface level headlines, skim the paper, but actually go deeper, which is what, if you want a democracy, it's an advanced form of human society, you have to do these things on some level. All right, we've gone on for too long. We just have some comments to take. Let's take the first comment quick. Long story short, the face of governance must change worldwide. On some level, I think this is true, because I always used to say, hey, look at how much more mature America, Canada, UK. Now I feel
America's politics has the most influence, as Trump has the most influence.
But the maturity of what you see by legislations and the like, I feel, you know, if they were better than us before, it's not that way now. We're all at the same level now around the world, and it's not, long and short, it's not professional. Let's take the next comment. It seems that our Prime Minister, after bending into U.S. administration and Donald Trump, is now using Trump's playbook and whittling away at the constitutional rights of citizens, starting with freedom of speech.
I agree with that, by the way.
It's just that the freedom of speech was tested more by active... Anyway, let me not get into that. But on some level, yes and no. Yes and no. It's not quite what Trump is doing. Yes, Trump has a way about being very aggressive or hostile to people that disagree with him, right? And on some level, I mean, here's the one thing I'll give Trump, and why I'm going to give him a little more leeway than politicians in certain ways. It's because I don't view him as a politician. You get what you pay for. You got a guy that was not a politician. I'm not going to expect him to be a professional politician now. If you don't like it, it's your fault. You picked him, right? He is what he is. He was selected for the mere fact that he was a political outsider. Now, is she following his playbook? I think part of it is motivated domestically. It's hard not to make those comparisons, though. I can't say definitively no, because the alliance seems to be very much along party lines, right? Our parties to their parties, PNM to the Democrats, UNC to the Conservatives. Why exactly? I'm not entirely sure, right? Because the UNC is not practicing now in government a more conservative approach to government. But, hey, Trump is technically a New York Democrat. But with regards to mannerisms and aggression with regards to public statements and at least trying to be decisive, but the funny part is, and this is one of the reasons why I would say I don't think, because when it comes to domestic policy, there are so many differences. And one of the things is we're not really seeing how...
The way in which it is delivered, though, is very much Trump's
Right,
way.
but think about crime. Whether you agree with what he's doing with regards to crime or not, he's doing something. Whereas we just have a state of emergency.
She is using, for his fight against crime, whether it is justified or not, he's saying immigrants are the cause. He has anytime immigrants is involved, he says that the immigrants, he gives the impression that the problem of crime is mainly being, and we in Trinidad talk about the Venezuelans.
But my point is, he is more proactive, whether you agree with what he's doing or not. But to us, it seems like our government is still reactive, trying to figure out what to do. We do a state of emergency. What is the next step?
No, with the Venezuelans, they blame the Venezuelans for the major increase in crime, because the nature of the crime is dealing with, allegedly, they're dealing with the transshipment of cocaine, allegedly dealing with imports illegally of guns, because a lot of the things that are published in the media, in newspapers, are Venezuelan involved, usually has to deal with bringing these young what you call about human trafficking or illegal importation of guns. So yes, she is supporting it, because what she's supporting America, and America with its zone of peace, she agrees with them that that a foreign intervention into Venezuela is justified, because they are bringing the cartels into Trinidad and Tobago. So the same way, President Trump has used the issue of the immigrants to say that immigrants are the major cause of crime in America, that when you have, whether it is drug-related or murders or whatever, he has, it seems to me, identified immigrants as being a major target. And the same way that our Prime Minister has supported
I understand that, but what I'm saying domestically, right? She's supporting Trump. She wants Trump for help. We acknowledge that we need international help to deal with international level issues. But domestically, I'm not really seeing the, well, there's a problem, I'm going to solve it with regards to crime. I'm seeing the, well, the Americans will solve it internationally for me. That's not a solution.
Yeah, but it doesn't, I'm not saying that it's a solution, but it's American law.
And
stand your ground.
They kept talking about it, they kept talking about it. Now that we've seen home invasions during this latest state of emergency, we're not really seeing them go further. Yet they haven't sorted out the FEL situation yet. So people are going to stand their ground with what, sticks?
Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is that you are being inspired by America and what America has done to fight crime. And stand your ground legislation is an example. And our focusing on targeting the Venezuelans as being the major cause of our cartel issue in this country.
I mean, not that I want it to go this far, but if we're going to follow the American example, where's the gun ownership? To make stand your ground as a societal measure something meaningful, because it's like a herd mentality. If you wanted to really impact crime, the implication is, well, you go into any random house and you're liable to get shot. But in Trinidad and Tobago, you go to any random house, you're liable to take somebody by surprise, and they don't have a gun and they don't have any means to defend themselves. So the stand your ground laws, we still have home invasions after they passed the stand your ground laws. So did it really do anything? No, it did not. So that's the thing. I've yet to see a crime plan, but we're over time. Hopefully, hey, I'll close with this. We don't want to see the government to fail.
No.
Right? But some of the things that we're seeing is echoing sentiments that are from sections of the public, and they are not unreasonable sentiments. And we are just trying to take the reasonable sides of it, apply the logic and the reasoning, present the case. If it's wrong, that's fine. Say it's wrong because of a reason and give the reason. Don't just say it's wrong because I believe in government. They had people that said that about the PNM as well, all the way down to the election. So that's technically not enough. A nation is a nation for all, not a nation for one side. Karen, thanks for joining me. Thanks to the callers and to the commenters. Somewhat of a heavy topic that could easily fly under the radar. That's one of the reasons why talking points exists, right? My fear is that it is by choice under the radar of too many of our population. It's not enough for us to say it. Folks, at some point, everyone is going to have to start to talk about these issues amongst their own social circles. Put some amount of time and effort. If we want this to be a democracy, if we want the government to sort out all of our problems, then we might as well be a communist country if it's going to just be so reliant on a central authority. Stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. It's nice to be nice. Have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Good morning and welcome back to Dollars and Cents. Now, on this episode in particular, I'll be talking about business insurance. And business insurance is an area or a topic that I take very seriously, and I think a lot of business people in Trinidad and Tobago, small business owners, don't see the importance in it. And to help support this conversation, I have a guest with me here, Mr. Amit Das, right? He is a chartered accountant. Now, I'll let you do the introduction for yourself.
Morning, everyone. My name is Amit Das. I'm a chartered accountant with the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Trinidad and Tobago. I've been working full-time in the industry since 2010, and I am a partner with Sinan & Das and Associates, and we deal with SMEs all the way up to oil and gas companies.
Okay, good. So this conversation will be tailored primarily surrounding around SMEs, right? And because the larger companies, the structures is much different.
Yeah.
So this is really for the small to medium-sized enterprise, where it's either the owner-operator business or a little bit larger to that extent, right? Now, before we get into the talking points that I have here, what are some of the major issues you would say that you would have noticed in dealing with SMEs in the area of, let's say, business insurance?
Well, I think the big issue is people don't have insurance, right? They don't have coverage to cover loss of property, plant, and equipment. Most SMEs, they tend to take insurance for the vehicle because they have to. And that's about it. It's only most SMEs only take insurance when they have to, or if something goes wrong. A lot of SMEs wouldn't even have public liability, right? So if a customer comes and damages herself on the compound, is the business owner to see the problem with?
Out of pocket.
Yeah.
So that's a good segue into the first point here, right? Now, business insurance as a safety net is really just more than just protection. It's about safeguarding your income, and it's a way to secure the revenue streams today